Hello, how are you? You look good today, and you've arrived in good timing too, because today we're going to look at every sex difference in Pokémon. And rather than just listing them like some lazy person just getting information off of Bulbapedia, let's actually explain why each sexual difference is there. To start though, you should learn about the term sexual dimorphism. It's a term used to describe animals that have different traits depending on their sex. The easiest examples are animals like peafowls and deer, and in most cases, these differences are for a good reason. Male deer, bucks, use their antlers to fight each other, and are much more aggressive than the female deer. Peacocks are glorious because they use their beauty to compete and persuade peahens to be their mate. Even humans have a large bit of sexual dimorphism, even all the way down to the bone structure. Not all animals have sexual dimorphism, however, and their only differences would be their sexual organs. And this fact is well represented in Pokémon, because for the most part, Pokémon look exactly the same no matter their sex. But a few of them do have notable differences, so let's begin. Also, we'll be using the sprites or the models from different versions of the games, depending on which ones just make it easier to see the differences. Also, as opposed to going in Pokédex order, we'll be going by category, since many Pokémon share differences for the same reasons. For example, the most obvious category, larger tusks and horns on the males. The male Zubat and Golbat have larger fangs than the females. Rhydon, Rhyhorn, Rhyperior, Goldeen, and Seaking males all have longer horns than the females, but only slightly. Sudowoodo males have larger head branches. Steelix males have extra rocky tooth bits on its jaw. Piloswine males have longer tusks, as do Mamoswine males. Houndoom males have longer horns, Donphan males have longer tusks, and Relicanth have larger jaw guards, almost being tusk-like. The reasoning for these differences is obvious. Just like in nature, the males compete for who gets to pass their genes on and mate with the females. As such, the males are more equipped for fighting than the females, be it through horns, tusks, teeth, or branches. Real-world examples of these are deer, elephants, goats, elk, kudu, nyala, moose, walruses, narwhals, and pretty much every animal with either tusks or horns. There are some animals where the males and females both have equally sized horns or antlers, but those are in the minority. Gligards get unique, but with the same idea. The stingers on the males are a bit bigger. This follows the same fighting logic as before, but isn't reflected in real scorpions. The way to tell the difference in real scorpions is how wide they are. Females are wider. But when it comes to males fighting over females, no Pokemon seems to do it more than the Garchomp line. Gible, Gabite, and Garchomp males have these slits in their fins. Their fins aren't any bigger, but they all have these slits. When it comes to real sharks and even orca whales and dolphins, the dorsal fins over time, due to how much they stick out, get damaged and scar as they fight more and more. And male sharks fight a lot more than female ones, since the males fight over females. Moving on to the next category, males don't only have larger parts for fighting. Oftentimes it's for other reasons, like survivability, or for showing off how fabulous you are to attract mates. This is most definitely the case for Unpheasant. Males have a pink mask and green marks on their bodies, while the females are brown and boring. This is exactly the case for real-world pheasants too. In fact, this trait is extremely common among our feathered friends. Males strut their stuff to show off why the female should choose him as her mate. Murkrow's head feathers are bigger and stand straighter on the male. Starly, Staravia, and Staraptor males have larger head spots. And while not exactly birds, Sneasel and Weavile males also have larger feathers, as do male Gulpins. And while not exactly feathers, Nuzleaf and Shiftry males have larger leaves, and Medicham males have a larger head bob, which can be seen as a type of plumage, meaning they are there to show off and get laid. Moving on to other parts, Dustox males have larger antennas. This reflects real moths too, especially the Luna moth, the moth Dustox is inspired from. The males have big feathery antennae, while the females just have antennae. The reason for this is so the males can smell the pheromones given off by the female up to a mile away. All the better to smell you with, my dear! This could also be the case with Ledyba and Ledian. The males have larger antennae too, but in Ledyba's case, they also look a bit like horns, and since this line is known for fighting, they likely use their antennae as horns too, hence the males having even bigger ones. Polytoad and also Toxicroak males have larger cheeks, also known as vocal sacs. Male toads and frogs use these to sound deeper, both to intimidate each other, and to sound out their low mating call. Octillary males have larger suction cups on their tentacles, which also reflects real Octopodidae. While on real octopus, not every suction cup is larger on the males, a few of them near the base are. These are primarily used for fighting other males, and also for showing off to females.
Look at my large suction cups, baby. Don't you love my tentacles?
Torchic males have the tiniest sexual difference of any Pokemon. They have this 1 pixel tiny little speck on their butts. The difference between male and female Torchics does get more obvious when it evolves. Combuskin males have larger head feathers, and the same goes for male Blazikins. The head crest is longer. This matches up with the chickens bred for cockfighting, especially the Taiwanese cockfighting roosters, as only the roosters, or the males, will do the fighting, and as roosters, they have longer head crests. Plus, the Thai roosters bred for cockfighting stand much more upright than your traditional rooster, hence Blaziken being completely upright. What about that little speck on Torchic? Well, both in cockfighting breeding and breeding chickens for meat and eggs, it was originally very difficult to tell the sex of the chicks. You would have to take care of all of them, and then separate the hens from the roosters once they were old enough to tell the difference. But it would sure be a lot nicer to be able to tell the sex of them from hatching, and that's exactly what all the chicken farmers thought. So, they did their selective breeding and genetic manipulation for centuries. And now, male chicks have 1 or 2 little feathers on their wing that are slightly longer than the rest. And that's how you tell the difference. And extremely, completely unnoticeable if you're untrained to look for it, difference. Just like that 1 tiny little speck on Torchic. A minor difference that's there, and most people won't notice it. Until you point it out to them, of course. So yeah, the more you know. Wooper males have 2 sets of gill branches, and Quagsire males have larger back fins. In the case of Wooper, axolotls naturally don't have any difference in sex beyond the females having a bigger cloaca. However, when it comes to behavior, males do a lot more fighting. The gill branches are a form of plumage to intimidate the other males and to show off to females. But also, axolotls in general have an amazing healing ability, and can regrow limbs and even brain matter and jaws with no visible scarring. So this soft tissue sticking off the side of its face is likely ripped off a lot if they're constantly losing limbs all the time. So males having it regrow back bigger may be something the Pokemon Company thought of while making this design decision. Quagsire, though, there really is no other explanation for this beyond more plumage for showing off to females. Japanese giant salamanders have no difference between the sexes besides the whole body size thing. So plumage, it's loose, but it's possible. And combining the last 2 categories of bigger horns and bigger other parts, we get to the Nidos. The Nidoran line is perhaps the most famous example of sexual dimorphism in Pokemon. The differences are obvious, and the 2 Nidorans even evolve into completely different Pokemon, though they are still counterparts to one another. Being more monster-like, though somewhat based on rhinos, they don't have much in the real world to compare them to. But the differences do seem clear enough. Nidoking and the whole male side of the line have much larger horns and more spikes all over their bodies. Arguably more armor as well. Clearly, the males of this line often fight, defending their territory and their families, while the females protect their young directly. Having more fat stockpiles also helps them while pregnant and producing milk for their young. I also have a huge video going into more detail about Nidoqueen right here. Check it out. Wow. It isn't always the males that are bigger or have bigger traits, however. In some species, it's the other way around. Most commonly, this is found in insects and fish, as is the case with Scyther and Scizor. Females have larger abdomens, specifically. And when it comes to real mantises, this is obviously the case. Kricketot females also have larger bodies, specifically around its neck. Considering that Kricketot and Kricketune are both based on fancy musicians or fancy orchestral conductors, the bigger neck piece may also be a reference to a fancy boa, or the large, puffy fur collars upper-class women wear when going to such events. Now, generally speaking, female fish tend to be larger than the males. This is also the case with Finneon and Luminion, though the females here are only larger in the fins, and being based on freshwater butterfly fish and betta fish, this isn't quite accurate. In these species specifically, the males actually have the larger fins, as a form of plumage, just like birds. So when referring to fish in general, yes, Finneon and Luminion are accurate. But when it comes to the prettier, plumagier fish that they are actually based on, the opposite is true. I'll give Game Freak a pass on that. Even though this isn't even the only mistake Game Freak has made involving larger females. Numel and Camerupt females have larger humps, which isn't the case at all for camels. Male camels in general have bigger everything, even humps, and even in proportion to their body. That's strike 2 for Game Freak, oh! Next, let's talk about fur. Ursaring females have more fur on their shoulders. While in general grizzly and sun bear males are larger, the females lose the most weight over winter since they give birth and then feed their babies with milk. So, upon exiting their den in spring, they have the appearance of having much more loose skin and much more fur, since it flaps about more thanks to their lack of stuffing. Female Abomasnows have larger chest fur too. Perhaps this is because of the same reasons. Abominable snowmen are most often portrayed as being ape-like, hence that's what a Yeti is, but there are some sightings and some myths that point to a more bear-like creature. This extra fur stuff that may just be conifer pines, we don't really know, may also just be there to simulate lumps of fat stored there, like breasts on an ape. Though in the case of Abomasnow being a conifer tree, it may be storing pine cones there. Larger pine cones are the female pine cones after all. There is also Pyroar. The males have large manes and the females have more tan fur. They also have differently shaped tails. The difference here is obvious. They are based on lions, another famous example of real-world sexual dimorphism. Lions' manes are theorized to be mostly for show. The size and cleanliness of the mane shows the fitness of the lion. If it's good, then other lions will be less likely to attack his pride. Shinx, Luxio, and Luxray males follow the same logic. The males have larger manes and more darker fur in general. Hypno is really interesting. Hypno females have longer neck fur, but why? Well, Drowsy and Hypno are based on the tapir. Drowsy more so for sure, and then Hypno gets a bit of a goblin or other fey creature in there. Specifically, this could be a Baku, a yokai dream eater that shares the name with what tapirs are called in Japanese. Baku. But what some have claimed is that Hypno is also inspired by Ammit, an Egyptian guardian and another heart and soul eater that is part crocodile, part lion, and part hippo. Tapirs are somewhat hippo-like, and Ammit shares the two-colored body aspect of tapirs as well. Plus, it has a male lion's mane, despite being entirely female. Hence, female Hypnos have more neck fur, or manes. Bidoof and Bibarel males have more fur too, but this is a problem. Every species of beaver fits the monomorph classification, meaning there is no way at all, externally speaking, to tell the sex of a beaver, most of the time at least. While nursing and pregnant, you can see the teats on the female. In fact, this monomorph classification would also describe most Pokémon. The extra fur on Bidoof and Bibarel may be trying to insinuate the idea that males are larger, but in nature, this isn't the case for beavers. Strike 3 for Game Freak. And with the third strike comes the end of part 1. Covering the science of all the sexual differences of Pokemon takes an incredibly long amount of time, so I kinda have to split it. So be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to be notified of when part 2 comes out. And until next time, please remember to never stop using your noggin. Hello, how are you? You look good today, and you've arrived in good timing too, because today we're going to look at every sex difference in Pokemon. And rather than just listing them like some lazy person just getting information off of Bulbapedia, let's actually explain why each sexual difference is there. To start though, you should learn about the term sexual dimorphism. It's a term used to describe animals that have different traits depending on their sex. The easiest also, as opposed to going in Pokédex order, we'll be going by category, since many Pokemon share differences for the same reasons. For example, the most obvious category, larger tusks and horns on the males. The male Zubat and Golbat have larger fangs than the females. Rhydon, Rhyhorn, Rhyperior, Goldeen, and Seaking males all have longer horns than the females, but only slightly. Sudowoodo males have sexual dimorphism, however, and their only differences would be their sexual organs. And this fact is well represented in Pokemon, because for the most part, Pokemon look exactly the same no matter their sex. But a few of them do have notable differences, so let's begin. Also, we'll be using the sprites or the models from different versions of the games, depending on which ones just make it easier to see the differences. Examples are animals like peafowls and deer, and in most cases, these differences are for a good reason. Male deer, bucks, use their antlers to fight each other, and are much more aggressive than the female deer. Peacocks are glorious because they use their beauty to compete and persuade peahens to be their mate. Even humans have a large bit of sexual dimorphism, even all the way down to the bone structure. Not all animals have larger head branches. Steelix males have extra rocky tooth bits on its jaw. Piloswine males have longer tusks, as do Mammoswine males. Houndoom males have longer horns, Donphan males have longer tusks, and Relicanth have larger jaw guards, almost being tusk-like. The reasoning for these differences is obvious. Just like in nature, the males compete for who gets to pass their genes on and mate with the female.